Hello, and welcome to Trekkie Tuesdays with what we're going to call the final episode of Season 2, Assignment Earth. This was, the official industry term is, I think, a backdoor pilot for a new sci-fi show that looks to have been, roughly speaking, the American Doctor Who, except it never got made. I'm thinking they must have thought Star Trek was going to be canceled and were trying to, gracefully segue into a successor to it. But then Star Trek didn't get canceled for another season. And possibly for that reason, we did not get to see the further experiences of the Doctor and Professor McGonagall and Random Companion in 1968 America.
I think I would have liked that show. It looked fun, but it does look pretty much exactly like Doctor Who, but with a cat.
But with a cat. There's
cat
only
companion.
occasionally, the Doctor only occasionally talks to cats in actual Doctor Who. Here, it looks like that would be a regular thing. Unless Isis is like a different animal every episode. Or sometimes he's walking around talking to a toaster oven, and he's like, "Yes, I know toaster oven." Somebody walks in and Sparks says, "Don't worry."
I think it was always going to be a cat. That sometimes turns into a human. A human woman.
A human woman. This is set in 1968, and the plot is that the character Gary Seven, who's being set up as the protagonist of this new show, wants to sabotage an American military installation because he wants to make sure that the Americans don't end up nuking the USSR, which is, I feel like, a bold move for Star Trek to take. They could have somehow made him be sabotaging both sides equally or sabotaging the Ruskies, but instead he's sabotaging the Americans. It forces his companion to choose between loyalties. It's a decent enough premise. Dialogue is pretty resolutely terrible throughout. They use the Star Trek musical cues and themes in the wrong ways. And I think really just the general surreality of the situation, especially with the added cat, is what saved it from being dull.
The cat is really great. It just makes every scene a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
This episode was not super. I mean, from this point of view, in 2000 and whatever year we're in, 14.
Time traveler.
Ah,
Caught you.
sorry, 2014. It doesn't seem that revolutionary. There's not a lot said, but the dialogue is just not even. It's mostly just this guy, number 7, crawling around and people getting beamed down and humans being like, "What is going on? I've been hit with a dumbstick." It's very silly. But there's a visually interesting thing going on with this episode. There's 1960s clothing plus cat plus Doctor Who wannabe plus Spock wearing silly hats throughout, and underlining all of this is this idea of let's not blow each other up. Hey. And a good line thrown in about, what was it exactly?
That's why our generation is kind of crazy and rebellious, because we're all worried we're not going to live till we're 30.
It's I liked that line. It was both very I don't know. It was telling, not showing, but hilariously obvious and on point and frank. I don't know. It was endearing. There are definitely like a lot of things since this episode involves time travel where you're like, what? How does that work? Even the premise itself is like, what? The Enterprise is going back into the 60s to study important events?
Because apparently that's something we can do
That's
casually
something you
now.
can do? I remember them having that episode where they discover time travel and they're like, oh yes, that might be remotely useful at some point. But I don't remember them being like, yes, protocol suggests that we should always analyze different important points, and this month we're up to the 60s. Like, I don't remember that, but whatever. I feel like they threw, maybe because they were sort of using this as a pilot for another season, somehow they got a lot of money for this episode, because it seems like there's a lot of sort of special effects and just like this is not your typical Star Trek episode where there are no effects. You know what I mean? And there's a cool set where there's basically a TARDIS inside of a closet, inside of a safe, or some things inside of those. I said that in the wrong order, but there's like cool shots of this guy on a rocket,
And that scene where Kirk is getting reports from all the senior officers,
right.
That was good.
Yeah, and this whole thing that Scotty is doing the entire time, he's like monitoring things through videos and stuff, and that, there's some cool things there. I'm sure that was like pretty cool at the time. It holds up.
That had me wondering how they did that with Scotty. Like they must have had like access to some kind of like footage, like the stock footage of a rocket from a bunch of different angles.
It was cool. Not a terrible episode. I don't really remember anything like god awfully said. Woman doing cool things in this episode. I think she has a name. I don't think she talks to other women, but Oh, well, she does talk to the cat.
Yeah.
She talks to the cat.
She talks to Isis. Isis has a name.
Isis passes the Bechdel test. So one of the women is a cat. So I don't know if that counts. I'm gonna go with it counts. I think this episode counts.
Nice.
Good job, Star Trek. Too bad this wasn't actually a Star Trek episode and was some other episode of some other show that never got made. But, noble try. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tune in next week for the start of the third and final season of the original series of Star Trek.
Woo-hoo.
Did spawn a lot of spin-offs, Star Trek. Just they were all Star Trek.